think honesty is a very precious commodity right now. I asked someone who had a lot of expertise in community planning and code rewrites, how could our city waste $8.5 million on this process? And this person said to me, it's $30 billion in development that we're talking about. And then it made very much sense to me that there are stakeholders who would gladly see millions spent on this in order to unlock billions in profit.
Upzoning is the tool to turn over a city from one class of people to another.
It's not an enticement for affordability, it's a mandate for profits.
You're talking about developing something new on top of where people already are. So inherently in that plan, if you live there, you're in the way.
We're going to get rid of the people that have always lived here because we've decided that they're not using the land correctly because they're not capitalizing enough, they're not making money off of it in the rate that they think that ought to be made out of it. And so they're going to force those people off, and then they're going to bring in new people, and those people are going to get to enjoy it.
There'll be a whole lot of money to be made in Austin, and Austin will fundamentally change. Let's say it will be cleansed. It will be cleansed of low-income people, a lot of middle-income people, and it can become a playground. And the people who service the playground will probably have to live in Pflugerville. It's all about following the money.
Upzoning is when you add entitlements to land use.
Entitlement is how much you can do with a piece of property. That's the core of zoning. What you can build, how much of the land you can cover up, and what you can use it for.
You take a plot right now that you allow a single family home on, and you say, okay, that's limited to this part of the property. You extend it to the lot lines. You raise the height that it can go into. You say that it can be now multiple homes. You say that now it can actually be a commercial business of some sort, or it can be a commercial business and residential properties of some sort. That's upzoning, is when you add entitlements onto a piece of property.
The more entitlements you get, the more your piece of land is worth.
We are at our home on 7201 Doherty Street in the Allendale neighborhood. Do you want some cabbage with the salad?
Yeah, that sounds good.
I'm an academic language therapist. I work with students who are dyslexic, teaching them to read, write, and spell. Dave is a retired audiologist and also does some pet sitting on the side. We've been married for 46 years.
We've lived here 15 years now. We love living here because of the trees, the convenience. It's very easy to get to just about every place from here. The neighbors here are very, very friendly.
We're always keeping an eye out for each other.
It's a smaller house, about 1,900 square feet. It fits us perfectly. We have a small backyard, but it's very nice for what we want. We do back up to commercial property.
We are just a block off of Burnett Road.
We're in the transitional zone. For people who are in the transition zone, if this house were to be torn down, to replace this house, you would have to have a minimum of a fourplex.
It's the transition from commercial properties on corridors down to single-family duplex homes. The day the ordinance is released, if you live in a transition zone, you will be out of compliance.
To be out of compliance is a non-conforming use.
That means it doesn't conform to what it's supposed to do.
So you have a single-family residential unit and a multi-family residential zoning. You will be limited to the amount and scope of any remodels, and you can't exceed that. The idea that you have limited single-family residential use is an anathema to a complete value.
I guess one of the biggest concerns would be, what are we going to do when we go to sell the house? Because we're going to be out of compliance for the zoning as a single unit house. So people who are looking for a single house with a yard and a garage, they're probably not going to be interested in looking at our property.
It puts a lid on a single-family residential house that can only be solved by tearing it down and making multifamily.
They want to do everything they can to make sure that those houses will convert into what they define as a minimum of 4 units.
When you go to sell it, now all of a sudden you have a house that is likely worth more to be torn down and turned into a multifamily.
We're pretty much going to have to sell to a developer, I would imagine.
That brings me to tears, honestly. When we paid this house off, Dave and I discussed, whatever happens in this world, at least we have this slice of land that we can call our own, and this is going to be our home place. I just feel like it's the utmost injustice to people like us who bought a home in good faith that this home would remain here for us.
The minute this happens, the potential increase of taxing on your land goes up with the entitlements on your land.
Property values are going to go up. Property taxes are going to go up.
So every time the taxes increase, it's a lot harder for some people to stay in their homes.
That could very well be that at some point we would have to move just because of the tax liability getting too high.
Let's say, for instance, I said, I've never paid your mortgage. However, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do for you in terms of zoning, and you will like it. And I'm going to tell you how I'm going to increase your taxes. And I don't care if you like it. And I don't want to hear from you. I am Seth Fowler. We're in the University Hills area of Austin, which is northeast Austin. We lived in this area since 1976. I have 3 daughters, 8 grandkids. Of course, they all grown and gone. This neighborhood is comprised of many, many single-family homes. Diverse neighborhood, naturally integrated, beautiful green space. My home is zoned single-family, as well as all these homes in this area. A home is a way in which wealth is passed down to generations. And so if me as a homeowner with these increased taxes can no longer pay the taxes, then the wealth that my wife and I have accumulated in this home will go to someone else, and our kids and grandkids will have nothing. That's not right. That's not right.
There's some things called compatibility zones, which means if you're in a residence next to a commercial area, the commercial area has to have standards of reduced size next to a residence. The idea came about that that was too much of a burden on the commercial property. The idea was, let's not have these compatibility zones because they're too restricting on the commercial. Let's change the actual neighborhood and the homes by changing their zoning in a way that the commercial properties won't have to have compatibility anymore.
So the compatibility standards are going to be limited, if they're there at all, for the people who own houses right behind us. We could be looking at 8-story buildings going up.
So you might find yourself as a small, modest house surrounded by much larger structures that very much change the way you live.
There are no parking requirements for the first quarter of a mile in.
Right now there's parking tables on how many parking spaces you need for people to go to a business. The whole concept of that was that you would provide adequate parking for the people who need to go to the commercial location. Well, the new concept is if we just eliminate parking, all of a sudden people will ride the bus.
All the parking goes on the street.
You're turning neighborhood roads into parking lots, and they're parking lots without sidewalks.
So now you got a line of cars covering the streets. EMS comes in, fire truck comes in. Fire trucks plant out feet on either side. There's not enough room in the street to plant both feet of a large fire truck.
The idea is that if people can't park their cars and they can walk to a bus, that they'll ride the bus to where they want to go. There's many corridors like Duval in Hyde Park, Enfield in West Austin, Pleasant Valley in Southeast Austin, the long corridors of Burnett and Lamar. There's a whole lot of road involved in this definition. It's a lot of square footage. They define these as being from 2 to 5 lots deep from the corridor. If there's a residential lot right next to the corridor lot, they could change the zoning on that residential lot to the same as what's on a corridor. So if the corridor is zoned commercial at 60 feet, then the first house that backs up to it would be commercial to 60 feet. And then that ripples or dominoes the transition zone further into the neighborhood. There will be a lot more density within a half a mile of these corridors, which basically covers the whole urban core of the city.
Many of us see our entire neighborhoods encompassed by what would be these transition zones.
Many, many, many properties will fall into this category. The communities that will be changed first will be the communities that have modest housing. Modest single-family duplex housing and modest apartment complexes that are providing a lot of the affordable housing that exists in Austin.
Many of the people who are able to stay are people living in public housing or holding on to a property in their family.
Those are the communities that they will focus on to redesign into communities that will be available for the very affluent.
The new opportunities, the new growth, the rapid development that's happening all around them, it's not for them. It's for someone else.
Everyone wants to know, how can I be a part of this growth? Well, you're not going to be a part of the growth. This growth is to serve people that don't live here.
The future that they envision has different people living in it than the people living there now.
We can learn far more about how housing has gotten so expensive in Austin by looking at high-income earners. We had a population the size of Pflugerville move in over the last 5 years that makes 2 and 3 times our median family income.
Of course it makes sense to build only high-end housing in Austin because 80% of the people moving here are high-income people. The average salary of the Google employee is $248,000 a year, and they're coming here like crazy. So why would the developer want to build a product that's less profitable? A big national study has shown that 85% of new urbanist communities are unaffordable to the median income people who lived there before. That tells you that they're remaking the community in something that's unaffordable to even the people who make the median wage.
My dad was married into a boxing family. My grandfather did it, my uncles did it, my brothers, all of my first cousins, they were all boxers. It was just part of the culture. I was walking around the gym at 4 years old, had my first fight at 7, had 100 amateur fights, eventually went on to get signed up with a big company and fight on TV, and it's been a blessing. I can't explain it. My name is Casey Ramos. We're in Southeast Austin. We're on the very southeast edge of Austin, the very border of Austin and Del Valley. It's peaceful, not a lot of traffic, not a lot of congestion, full of hardworking, working class people who get up in the morning, work hard for what they got, and everybody enjoys the way it is. Good old American neighborhood. This house is in the transition zone. This entire neighborhood is in the transition zone. We have 50,000 people in one area code. It's a lot of people, it's a small city, and now we want to quadruple that? Where are people gonna park? Where's our fresh water gonna stay? We're over a sensitive area, we're over the Edwards Aquifer. What's all the concrete gonna do to the heat? Like the movie, what's the movie, The Field of Dreams? Yeah. Build it and they'll come? Yeah, build it and they're definitely gonna come, but is it gonna be sustainable? Is it gonna be practical? Is it gonna last? Original Austinites literally built the city. Taxes, year in and year out, hard work. You work 20, 30 years to build your house, and somebody's telling you what you can and can't do to your house. It's not fair, it's not equitable. It's a contradiction to the American dream. I want to be a homeowner, and I want to raise a family, like how I was raised, in the environment, in the neighborhood, and in the culture, and the Austin atmosphere. You know, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just that's the dream. You know, to raise a family and to enjoy the riches and the fun and the exhilaration of Austin. You know, that's what I would like.
The City Council set a goal of providing for adding capacity for over 400,000 units in Austin in 10 years. That's about 100 units every single day. Their logic is if you produce like that, you'll provide affordable housing.
Trickle-down economics is a colloquial term for supply-side economics. It's basically the idea that if you increase the supply of something in the economy at large, that ultimately it's going to get to everybody and it's going to benefit everybody. The typical example of that is tax policy, right? If we cut taxes on the rich, they're going to take that money and they're going to spend it and invest it in creating jobs, and sooner or later, all the people, middle class, poor, working class, will get a piece of that. With housing policy, it's the idea that if we increase entitlements or deregulate land use altogether, that they're going to build and build and build, and suddenly housing is going to get cheap for everybody.
Well, the theory is that you build your way to affordability. You can violate the main tenet of capitalism by just overbuilding to the point that you have a lot of stupid developers that are saying, I'm going to build this house at a loss so it'll be affordable. I hope somebody comes and gets me when that happens. I want to see it.
The market never provides affordable housing. When builders aren't making money building housing, they stop. And in the new ordinance, there's a clause that says that affordable housing only needs to be provided if it's viable for the developer.
My name is Justin Irving. We're in Duplex Nation. It's a little piece of cherry wood in the middle of Austin, Texas, just on the east side, right off of 35. We're a pretty young family. We have a 5-year-old and a brand new 4-month-old, and Jones and July are like, you know, they're pretty much everything to us. The fact that we're just down the street from the school is invaluable to us. The fact that we're in a community that has real continuity and like real, you know, real community. I've lived in a lot of places where, you know, you didn't know your neighbors, and you sure as heck didn't know anybody else who weren't your neighbors. I mean, the further you got away from your house, the less people you knew. That is definitely not true here. The neighborhood was built in about 1949. Before that, it was a pecan orchard. It's been supporting students and artists and small families for the last probably 60 years. I think the average square foot here is a little smaller than your average square foot around the city. Each unit here is about 850 square feet, so the ability to charge high rents is fairly limited by the space there. I see those demolition permits escalating. I see larger developments, more pricey developments being built all over the neighborhood. If you see housing affordability as a social problem, you can't rely on the market to fix that for you. There are just too many other interests involved other than affordability, and the number one is profit. People my generation and younger, there's an ability for us to be exploited, for people to take advantage of us, and I think that that's one of the things that the supply side folks are doing. They're saying that we have a solution here for you. Now, granted, it's a market-based solution, but it's a solution. We're going to solve your affordability issues. And there's so much need for that on our side. We're at such a perilous place that I don't think that we feel that we can negotiate. I don't think that upzoning the entirety of Austin, increasing entitlements for land development, and essentially making the land underneath us more valuable is going to ameliorate any of those issues. I think it's going to exacerbate them.
It's not about affordability, it's about profitability.
The motivation is allegedly affordability, but it's not there. What is there is the ability to densify in building terms and make the money and move on.
It's kind of a transfer of wealth in a way. They're not taking your home away, but they're changing the use and the value of it. And they hope to provide cheaper land for people to make bigger profits.
One of the highest profit margin is in real estate. That's where the money is. All of these lots represent a 30% profit when they go in, take these lots and build new units. That's the motivation.
It's all about following the money.
I asked someone who had a lot of expertise in community planning and code rewrites, how could our city waste $8.5 million on this process? And this person said to me, it's $30 billion in development that we're talking about. And then it made very much sense to me that there are stakeholders who would gladly see millions spent on this in order to unlock billions in profit. It very easily becomes just a way of extracting wealth and income out of an area or out of an entire population.
It's a greed machine, and there's a wealth extraction equation that is being calculated against people.
It's a gift, and the gift is coming out of the pockets of the people who live here now.
I think this is a classic deregulation debate. When is too much greed and too much accumulation of capital destructive to the entire system itself?
A lot of the trend is to push housing away from being shelter into a monetary investment.
What used to be a family's pocketbook investment is now major investment opportunities for investment firms.
There are different reasons why people buy property. Homeowners and families, consumers, buy it for its use value, right? The usefulness of it. They use it as a home. They're not trying to raise the value of this property. They're trying to just get what it's meant to be, right? They're trying to live there and have the shelter. An investor buys a property to be able to maximize the amount of money that they can make off of it.
Last year, 60% of home sales in the United States were to investors, not to people living in homes.
Housing is not supply and demand. It's an investment tool.
This is not a matter of supply and demand. We know that because it's happening everywhere.
There's plenty of money in other parts of the country, the world, and the state to eat up all the housing that's produced.
And it's a matter of capital investment. And it's about the private sector distorting these things. The big problem with housing prices overall right now is that we have seen this massive influx of capital on a global basis into real estate markets because other assets haven't been performing like they have in the past, namely bonds, right? You have trillions of dollars pouring into this, which is why you have a global increase in housing prices, and you have these housing crises and the gentrification crises happening everywhere right now. It's not just in Austin, it's happening everywhere. And that's why local policy changes or zoning ordinances aren't a fix to this any more than a local zoning ordinance can fix any other global problem.
Part of the reason that we're looking at upzoning the entire city is to increase city revenue. City governments all over the United States are making this Faustian bargain where they believe that if they do not grow, they will die. They have built their funding methodologies on a bit of a pyramid scheme where they borrow for the future at rates that would require them to have more people paying in by the time the bill comes due. And we've been heavily involved in that in Austin. To me, when I hear our elected officials talking about how upzoning is going to solve some things, actually the things that I think that they think it's going to solve are those funding issues. They're not housing issues.
On my street, I looked, and my lot is valued at a couple $100,000, a lot more than the house. And the condos down the street are taxed at $6 million. The land is taxed at $6 million.
There's a real simple power of observation that kind of cuts through a lot of this stuff. I've had a lot of conversations about what was being proposed in the Land Development Code with, for example, young people in the service industry. And I say there's a lot of people who want to give zoning entitlements so that everywhere there's a house you can put 4. Or allow people to build way more on their property. And I immediately hear things like, oh yeah, I used to rent a house close by here and the owner sold it and they knocked it down and built 4 houses. And all of them cost 3 times more than the one that we were renting.
the community of diverse people, of poets and musicians, artists, scientists, government workers, has made Austin a different kind of community than a lot of the cities in Texas. And now there's no value in us anymore, and we need to leave.
You're supposed to back up a U-Haul, load your belongings, and get out so that this land can be used to its fullest capacity.
Why in these neighborhoods that have been so much a part of the culture and the beauty of the city of Austin, why destroy all of them?
The whole culture will change completely? Oh no, that is not acceptable.
Austin's all I know. I've been here for 46 years. I like everything about it. I still love Austin, but I may not be able to afford Austin at some point in time. So I may have to move to a place that I don't want to move. It's devastating. Quite simply devastating.